Rain fell in a thin, cold sheet, turning the quiet, small-town street into glass and black ribbon. Porch lights blinked like tired eyes, and the gutters whispered with runoff. Most houses on Maple Row were asleep, but a single sound refused to let the night stay ordinary. A long, aching howl, rising from the sidewalk and climbing straight to the second floor of the Lawson house. The police dog beneath that window didn't pace or whine the way a lost animal might. He stood planted, chest out, paws squared, reins stippling the dark fur along his back. A canine veteran, the kind people in town still talked about in hushed, admiring tones. Rex, retired but never really off duty. His head tilted slightly as if listening for an answer only he could hear. Then he howled again, louder, deliberate, a warning shaped into sound. Across the street, Mrs. Klein pushed her blinds aside with 2 fingers, careful not to make the slats click. Next door, a teenager's phone lit up as he recorded from a crack in the curtain. Even the late-night delivery driver at the corner slowed, frowning at the scene like it didn't belong in this town. Upstairs, behind the glass, a child's curtain fluttered once. Just a small tremor of fabric in the lamplight. Little Emma Lawson had been in bed for hours, but now a faint silhouette shifted near the window. Small shoulders, a head turning, the hesitant motion of someone trying to see without being seen. Rex's body tightened, his tail low, his gaze locked not on Emma, but on the right edge of the frame where the siding met the sill. A soft metallic tick answered from outside, so quiet it could have been rain tapping a nail. Except Rex heard it, and the muscles along his jaw bunched. His growl rolled out, deep and controlled, the sound of training and certainty. Inside the room, Emma's hand rose toward the curtain, stopped, and dropped again, as if she'd suddenly remembered a rule. Don't open it. Downstairs, her guardian, Maris Lawson, stirred from the couch, half asleep with a folded blanket, and the TV paused on a news channel. Rex's howl punched through the walls and dragged her upright. She padded to the window, heart thudding, and caught the dog's eyes. Bright, fixed, urgent. Maris mouthed his name, confused, then followed his stare to the window above. The curtain shifted again, and for one breath the lamplight showed something else moving behind the glass, taller than a child, too close to the pane, a shape that didn't belong in Emma's room. Rex barked once, sharp, commanding, then threw his head back and howled as if announcing it to the entire street. The air carried wet leaves and distant diesel, and the neighborhood held its breath, waiting for the next sound. Footsteps, a scream, a shatter. Anything to explain why Rex refused to move at all. Police dog howls at night outside little girl's window, and whatever was up there had just made a fatal mistake. Maris Lawson yanked the front door, opened so fast the chain slapped the frame, and the cold rain slapped her right back, beating on her lashes and turning her thin hoodie dark at the shoulders. "Rex," she called, voice sharp with fear. Because in this town, you didn't see dogs roaming at midnight, and you definitely didn't see a police dog standing like a sentry beneath a child's window. Rex didn't even flick an ear at his name. He stayed locked in place, rigid as a statue carved out of muscle and discipline, rain crawling down his muzzle as he stared at the upper corner of Emma's window, specifically the right side, where the sash met the trim. That detail hit Maris like a warning flare. He wasn't looking at Emma. He was looking at an entry point. A gust pushed mist across the yard, and in it, Maris finally recognized him properly, like the night had been waiting for her to catch up. The faded patch of a harness still hugged his broad chest. His collar wasn't a cheap strap, but a heavy-duty working band with an old brass tag that many locals had seen before at parades and school demos. Rex, K9 unit, retired. The dog who had found a missing toddler in the woods 3 winters ago. The dog who had sniffed out a gas leak before it turned into a headline. The dog who, according to his former handler, never once, never, threw an alert without reason. People in town didn't just like Rex. They trusted him the way you trust gravity. And that meant this wasn't a random noise in the night. This was a siren with fur. Maris backed onto the porch, craning her neck up to Emma's room, trying to see what Rex saw. "Emma!" she shouted, and her voice cracked because she realized she couldn't see her niece clearly anymore. Only the blur of the curtain and the pale glow behind it. Rex's howl had dragged her awake, but now it was dragging the entire street into the same shared nightmare. That something was wrong in the safest place a child should have. Windows lit up along Maple Row. As neighbors woke and peered out, their faces washed in TV blue and phone screen light. Someone whispered, "That's Rex." Like naming him made the moment real. Someone else muttered, "He wouldn't be out for nothing." Maris stepped off the porch into the wet grass, each footfall sinking with a soft squelch, and forced herself to look carefully at the window frame, at the siding, at the shadows near the gutter. The rain made everything shine, which meant it also made everything easier to see if you knew what to look for. Rex's eyes never blinked, fixed on that same corner. His lips peeled back just enough to show a sliver of teeth, not in rage, but in a controlled professional warning. Then it came. A soft click, almost polite, like a lock turning the wrong way. Not thunder, not a branch, a latch. Maris froze so hard she felt her spine go cold. The sound didn't come from the front door, or the garage, or the fence gate. It came from above. Emma's window. Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the rain like a warning you felt in your bones. He shifted his weight forward, paws digging into the mud as if he was ready to launch. And for the briefest instant, Maris saw it too. The smallest movement at the edge of the frame, a shadow sliding where no shadow should slide, a hand-shaped darkness near the latch. Maris's breath stalled in her throat. She took one stumbling step back toward the door to grab her phone, to scream, to do something, anything. But the night stole her timing. Rex barked once, explosive and final, and the upstairs curtain jerked inward like something had just brushed it. Maris looked up, heart hammering so loudly she couldn't hear anything else, and the world seemed to tighten to a single question. Who was at that window? The answer was right there, inches from being seen. Then the moment snapped, like a film cut mid-scream, leaving only Rex's low, relentless growl and the rain pounding down as if trying to wash the truth away. Morning arrived like nothing had happened, and that was the most unsettling part of all. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window in a clean, forgiving way, turning the rain-slicked street into something bright and ordinary. As if the night had been a bad dream the town collectively agreed to forget. Maris stood at the counter, pouring cereal into a chipped blue bowl, listening to the familiar rattle of flakes and the soft hum of the refrigerator, clinging to routine like a lifeline. Emma sat at the small table in her socks, backpack already propped against the chair, swinging one foot the way she always did on school mornings. She smiled when Maris looked at her, too quick, too practiced, and said she wasn't hungry even as she lifted the spoon. Her eyes kept drifting, not to the TV or the window outside, but to the wall that separated the kitchen from the staircase. When she finally stood to grab her jacket, her hand brushed the windowsill near the door, and Maris saw it clearly this time. Emma's fingers trembled, just a little, like she was touching something still hot. "You okay, kiddo?" Maris asked, keeping her voice light. Emma nodded immediately, too fast. and said, "I'm fine," the way children do when they don't want adults to ask more questions. Outside, Maple Row looked exactly the way it always did on a weekday morning. Lawns steamed faintly as the last of the rain evaporated. A jogger passed, earbuds in. Mrs. Klein waved from her porch, cheerful and loud, asking if everything was all right after all that noise last night, her smile lingering a second longer than polite curiosity required. Maris waved back, a tight motion of the hand, and felt that same cold thread pull through her chest. As they stepped onto the porch, Emma's backpack thumped against her shoulders, and the world felt normal enough to almost believe. Almost. Down the street, parked along the curb where no one usually parked, sat a dark sedan with out-of-state plates, its windows tinted just enough to hide the driver. It hadn't been there yesterday. Maris clocked it without meaning to, the way fear teaches you to notice things you used to ignore. The engine wasn't running, but the car felt awake, like an animal pretending to sleep. A few houses down, a man Maris vaguely recognized, someone's cousin, someone who'd helped with a fundraiser once, leaned against a mailbox, coffee in hand, smiling too broadly as Emma walked past. His eyes followed her, then flicked to Maris, then back again, lingering just long enough to feel wrong. "Big day, huh?" he called out, friendly as sugar. Maris nodded and kept walking, placing herself a half step closer to Emma without thinking. And then she saw Rex. The retired K9 sat at the edge of the block where Maple Row bent toward the main road, perfectly still, his body aligned with the street like he was guarding an invisible line. No leash, no handler, just Rex. Ears up, gaze steady, watching the Lawson house with the same intensity he'd shown the night before. Sunlight warmed his coat, but it hadn't softened him. He didn't wag his tail or acknowledge the passing jogger. When Emma noticed him, she stopped walking altogether. Rex met her eyes, and for a moment the world narrowed to that silent exchange. His tail thumped once against the pavement, slow, controlled, then stilled again. Emma swallowed and adjusted her backpack straps, forcing herself to move. Maris felt a chill despite the warming air, because towns don't reset this cleanly after something almost happens. They don't look this peaceful unless something is being hidden. The cereal bowls were empty, the goodbye was rushed, the bus would be coming any second. And yet the street felt like a stage set. Too neat, too calm, with Rex sitting watch down the block like a statue carved to remember a warning no one wanted to talk about. The first siren cut through Maple Row like a blade, rising and falling as it raced toward the school. And the sound snapped the neighborhood's staged calm, clean in half. Maris had just watched Emma's bus disappear around the bend when her phone buzzed with 3 messages. "Lockdown? Did you hear? Somebody's missing." Followed by a call from an unknown number that rang twice before dropping. The line went dead, and for one suspended second, she stood in the doorway with the smell of milk and cereal, still hanging in the kitchen, trying to convince herself this was just rumor. Then a second siren joined the first, then a third, and Maple Row began to spill people. Doors opening, slippers on wet steps, heads craning toward the main road. "It's the elementary," Mrs. Klein shouted, voice thin. "They're locking it down." Someone else yelled that buses were being turned around, that a man had been seen near the playground fence. Maris's stomach dropped. She ran back inside, grabbed her keys, then stopped as another sound cut in. Rex, barking, sharp and urgent, from the front yard. Maris bolted outside and followed the dog's line of sight straight up to Emma's window. In daylight, the glass looked innocent, but the frame didn't. A smear of dried mud along the lower trim and faint crescent prints in the flower bed where last night's rain had softened the earth. Maris stepped closer and saw what made her breath catch. Caught on the metal latch was a single snapped fiber, pale and synthetic, like a thread torn from a glove. She pinched the fiber between two fingers, feeling it bite her skin, and the whole yard felt contaminated. Every raindrop, every footprint, every friendly wave from last night's watchers. Above, Emma's curtains hung still, but Maris could swear the room was listening. Her mind flashed to the click in the night, to the curtain jerking inward. Rex sniffed once, then lifted his head, ears spearing forward, and his barking changed, no longer warning the house, but targeting something moving away. Maris spun and saw the too friendly mailbox leaner from earlier, now walking fast with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He kept his face angled down, but he wasn't strolling, he was escaping. Rex lunged to the end of the yard, barking in a steady rhythm that sounded like an accusation. The man glanced back, eyes wide, and Maris noticed a dark streak of wet clay on his right shoe that didn't match the drying pavement. "Hey!" she shouted. But the rising crowd noise swallowed her as more neighbors poured outside, phones up, sirens still wailing in the distance. The man turned as if to smile, as if to play harmless, then saw Rex's posture, coiled power, certainty, and his smile vanished. He pivoted toward the parked dark sedan with out-of-state plates. Rex barked harder, and Maris understood, with sick clarity, that the chaos wasn't random. It was cover, and someone had tried to slip away. Before the town fully woke up, the crowd's noise was still rising when a different presence cut through it. Not loud, not urgent, but precise. A man stepped onto Maple Row from the corner where the street curved, moving at a steady pace that ignored the sirens and the shouting entirely. He wore a faded jacket darkened at the seams, boots laced tight, posture straight without stiffness, and he stopped the instant he saw Rex. Everything about him changed in that moment, like a switch thrown behind calm eyes. "Easy, partner," he said. Not to quiet the dog, but to acknowledge him, and Rex's barking didn't stop. But it sharpened, focused, recognizing something familiar. The man took in the scene in a single sweep. The mud under the window, the snapped fiber on the latch, the way Rex's nose angled slightly into the breeze instead of down at the ground. "He's tracking air," the man said calmly, more to himself than anyone else. And Maris felt the words land like a stabilizing weight. She turned to him, startled. "You know him?" she asked. The man nodded once. "Worked with him," he replied. "Long time ago." He crouched near the window without touching anything, eyes narrowing as he studied the frame. "No forced entry," he murmured. Latch was tested, not broken. Whoever did it knew how to be quiet. His gaze followed the faint trail of disturbed earth in the flower bed, then angled toward the street where the dark sedan had been parked. "And they left in a hurry." Around them, neighbors speculated loudly, someone arguing with a uniformed officer who had just arrived and was already waving it off as neighborhood panic. The man ignored all of it. He straightened and stepped subtly into Maris's space, positioning himself between her and the street, his shoulder angled like a shield. "Where's the girl?" he asked. "School," Maris said, her voice tight. "They locked it down." The man's jaw flexed. "Good," he said, meaning it. Rex moved closer to the man's leg, body still rigid, but now aligned with him, the way working dogs align with handlers they trust. The man followed Rex's line of sight again and raised his hand palm down, a small controlled signal. Rex stopped barking and stood alert, tail low, eyes burning toward the end of the block where the crowd thinned. "He's not reacting to the noise," the man said quietly. "He's reacting to one person." As if summoned by the words, the too friendly neighbor reappeared at the edge of the gathering, trying to melt into it, head down. Rex's growl returned instantly. The man's eyes locked on the suspect's shoes, still marked with drying mud, and then flicked to the snapped fiber in Maris's hand. "Don't touch that anymore," he said gently, and Maris realized he wasn't asking. He pulled a clean cloth from his pocket and held it out. "Bag it. That's evidence." A uniformed officer finally noticed the shift in energy and started over, irritation on his face, but the man didn't look at him. He knelt again, tracing the air with his eyes where the window would have been opened, where a hand would have reached, where hesitation would have cost time. "This wasn't random," he said, voice low and certain. "It was a test. And whoever did it didn't expect Rex." He stood and met Maris's eyes fully for the first time. "From now on," he continued, "you don't stand alone. You don't answer questions without me present. And if Rex sits like this again, you listen." Rex's ears flicked at his name, still focused, still working. The sirens wailed on. The street buzzed with fear and rumor. But around Maris, something solid had settled. A quiet competence, a protector's calm, and she understood with sudden clarity that the night had drawn a line, and this man had just stepped onto the right side of it. The first patrol car rolled up with lights flashing, like it was arriving to a parade, not a crisis. And the officer, who stepped out, wore the kind of smile you put on when you want people to calm down and stop asking questions. All right," he called, palms out, voice loud enough to be heard over the murmurs. "Everybody take a breath. This is Maple Row, not some crime show." Behind him, a second figure emerged from the passenger side. Lieutenant Halverson, the town's familiar face in a pressed uniform, belly straining the buttons, hair neatly combed as if he'd had time to fix it before stepping into the chaos. He looked around with an expression that tried to pass as patient concern, but his eyes were sharp in the wrong places, tracking phones, tracking who was recording, tracking the dark sedan at the curb as if making sure it hadn't been noticed too loudly. "Let's not turn this into a panic," Halverson said, voice folksy, almost friendly. "Kids get spooked, dogs howl, people hear a latch, and suddenly it's a break-in." Maris felt heat flare behind her ribs. Latch clicked on my niece's window," she snapped. "There are footprints. There's—" Halverson cut her off with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm sure you think you heard something," he said, the word think landing like a slap. "But we don't want to start rumors about prowlers and kidnappers based on neighborhood nerves." The protector, Cal, that was what Maris heard someone call him, didn't raise his voice. He just watched. And when he watched, you could feel the room around him get smaller, like the air had to behave. Rex stood beside Cal's leg, still, coiled, ears up, gaze fixed down the street where the too friendly man hovered near the crowd's edge. Halverson noticed the dog and frowned. "Whose animal is that?" he asked, and the officer with a smile answered too quickly. "It's just a dog, Lieutenant. We'll get animal control." Cal's head turned slightly. "That's Rex," he said. "Retired canine. Town knows him." Halverson's lips tightened. "Exactly," he said. "Retired. That means he's not on duty and he's causing a disturbance. For public safety, we need him secured." Cal's eyes narrowed at the phrase, public safety, like it had been used as a blanket to smother something. A woman in the crowd protested, "Rex saved my brother." And Halverson lifted his hands again, performing calm. "And we appreciate his service," he said smoothly. "But we can't have an aggressive dog in the middle of a stressed community. We're trying to prevent hysteria." Maris felt the words grind against her teeth. Prevent hysteria. Not prevent danger. Not protect a child. Prevent hysteria. Cal stepped half a pace forward, placing his body between Maris and Halverson, the same way he'd positioned himself between her and the street, and he spoke softly. "There are prints under that window," he said. "There's fiber on the latch." "That's not hysteria." Halverson's smile held, but his eyes flashed with irritation. "You're not on the force anymore, Cal," he replied. And the way he said it wasn't just dismissal. It was a reminder. "We've got it handled." Then he added, almost offhand, like he was talking about a pothole complaint. "Besides, whoever it was probably just wanted to scare her. Nothing was taken. No need to blow it up." Cal's head tilted a fraction, as if he'd heard a wrong note in a familiar song. "Just wanted to scare her," he repeated quietly. Maris's stomach dropped, because nobody had said the word scare. Nobody had described intent. Not yet. Halverson had. Cal's gaze flicked from Halverson to the window, then to the parked sedan, then to the too friendly man's muddy shoes, and something hard settled behind his calm. Halverson noticed the shift and pushed forward, gesturing to the smiling officer. "Call animal control," he ordered. "Get that dog out of here before he bites someone." Rex's ears pinned back slightly, not in fear, but in irritation, and he let out a low growl that vibrated against Cal's boot. Cal didn't move to leash him. He didn't argue loudly. He simply met Halverson's eyes and said, "You're trying to contain this." The lieutenant's smile faltered for the first time, a crack in the folksy veneer. "Watch your mouth," Halverson warned. Cal's voice stayed level. "I'm watching more than my mouth," he answered. And Maris realized, with a cold clarity, that this wasn't local incompetence or small-town laziness. This was a lid being slammed down, fast, before the truth could boil over. The first ping cut through the standoff like a dropped glass. A woman near the back of the crowd gasped and lifted her phone higher, her face draining of color as she stared at the screen. I've got something," she said, voice shaking. And suddenly everyone leaned in, despite Halverson's raised hand. "It's my doorbell cam from last night." She turned the phone, and though the image was grainy, it was unmistakable. A tall, hooded figure standing near the Lawson house, close enough to the window that the pale frame caught the edge of his sleeve. A murmur rolled through Maple Row, swelling as another neighbor spoke up. "Check the timestamp," and then another. "That's not a kid." Before Halverson could shut it down, a second clip surfaced. This one from a block over, showing the same dark sedan rolling past slowly an hour earlier, headlights off, looping the street like it was mapping it. Cal didn't react outwardly, but his body shifted subtly, angling to shield Maris as phones came up all around them. "Send it to me," he said quietly to the woman, already pulling a clean flash drive from his pocket like he'd expected this moment. "Now. And don't keep the original on your phone." His voice carried the weight of procedure, not panic, and people obeyed without questioning why. The clips moved fast. Airdrop pings, whispered confirmations, and Cal took each file, labeling them under his breath, hands steady. He leaned close to Maris, close enough that only she could hear him. "Keep Emma inside," he said. "No interviews, no statements. If anyone asks, you're waiting on counsel." Maris nodded, heart pounding because the word counsel told her everything she needed to know about how bad this was. Rex remained planted near the edge of the yard, eyes fixed on the same property line he'd been watching since morning, as if there were an invisible fence only he could see. Every time someone crossed it, every curious neighbor, every officer pacing, his head followed, measuring, evaluating, then returned to that single point down the street where the sedan had been. Halverson's face had gone tight, his voice rising as he tried to regain control. "All right, that's enough," he snapped. "We're not doing amateur detective work in the middle of an active situation." But the town had tasted proof now, and it spread faster than any siren. People started asking the questions out loud. Why was someone at a child's window? Why was that car circling? Why were we being told to calm down instead of lock down? A teenager uploaded a still frame before anyone could stop him, and within minutes, phones buzzed with messages from outside Maple Row. Cal saw it happen. The shift from local worry to public pressure, and his jaw set. Across the street, the too friendly man was gone, vanished without anyone noticing exactly when, and the dark sedan was no longer parked at the curb. Cal's eyes flicked to the empty space, then back to Rex, who growled low, ears tracking a distant engine sound. Cal felt it then, the way you feel a storm before the clouds break. The wrong people were paying attention now. Somewhere beyond Maple Row, someone was realizing their quiet test had failed, that evidence had slipped their grasp, and that a retired K9 and a handful of neighbors had turned a contained scare into a spreading problem. The town kept talking, kept sharing, kept asking, and as the pressure rose, Cal knew the next move wouldn't be about calming anyone down. It would be about pushing back. The town's daylight noise never reached the back room behind Whitaker Hardware, where the air smelled of old cardboard, machine oil, and stale coffee that had been reheated too many times. The door to the storage office shut with a soft, controlled click, and the world outside buzzed, sirens, neighbors, phones. Might as well have been a different planet. Inside, a man in a tailored coat sat at a metal desk like it was a boardroom table. His silver hair combed neatly, his hands folded as if he were about to sign something charitable. Everyone in town knew him as Mr. Alden Whitaker, sponsor of the Little League, smiling face at ribbon cuttings, the man who got things done. But here, away from cameras and casseroles, the smile was gone, replaced by calculations so cold it seemed to lower the room's temperature. Across from him stood a broader man with thick forearms and a neck that strained his collar, a bully enforcer type who carried his impatience like a weapon. He didn't sit. He paced, boots thudding softly on concrete, jaw working as if chewing on anger. "You said it would be quiet," the enforcer growled. "Now it's all over town. Doorbell cams, posts, people talking." Whitaker didn't look up right away. He tapped a pen once, slow, then twice, like he was counting down to a decision. "It was quiet," he replied, voice smooth, measured. "Until someone brought a dog into it." The enforcer scoffed. "A dog?" Whitaker finally lifted his eyes, and the look he gave could have cut steel. "Not a dog," he corrected. "A retired K9 with a hero story and a handler with a conscience. That changes the math." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed screenshots, grainy, time-stamped clips from Maple Row that someone had already pulled from the internet. Whitaker's lips tightened as he studied the still frame of a shadow at the window. "People don't panic over rumors," he said. "They panic over images." The enforcer leaned in, nostrils flaring. "So what now? We lean harder? We scare them into shutting up?" Whitaker's pen stopped. "We control the narrative," he said calmly, as if discussing a zoning permit. "And we remove the loose ends." The enforcer's mouth curled. "Loose ends like the kid?" Whitaker didn't flinch at the word kid. "The little girl isn't random," he said, voice dropping. "You understand that, yes?" The enforcer shrugged. "I know she's connected." Whitaker opened another file, thin but important. and pointed to a line item with the pen. Her guardian's brother worked nights at the old municipal archive, he said. He had access. He took something he shouldn't have. He died before we recovered it. The enforcer's eyes narrowed. So the girl has it? Whitaker's gaze sharpened. Or she heard something, he replied. Or she saw something. Or it was placed in that house without her realizing it. Inside a toy, inside a book, behind a vent cover. It doesn't matter which, not yet. What matters is this. If that item surfaces, the project doesn't just stall. It burns. He said project the way other men said family, protective, possessive, absolute. The enforcer cracked his knuckles. Then we take it back, he said. Tonight. Quiet. Whitaker's expression turned contemplative, then disappointed, like the enforcer had suggested using a hammer to fix a watch. You already tried quiet, Whitaker said, and you left prints, fibers, a trail. His eyes flicked up, hard. Do you know what happens when a small town feels threatened and thinks it found a villain? They don't look away. They gather. They dig. They call people they shouldn't call. The enforcer's voice rose. So you want me to do nothing while they spread this? Whitaker stood then, and though he wasn't physically imposing, the room seemed to adjust around his authority. No, he said softly. I want you to do what you're good at, strategically. He walked to a corkboard on the wall, covered in maps, permits, photos, and names. Community leaders, officers, business owners, strings connecting them like a spider web. He tapped a photo of Cal, the former handler, then a photo of Maris, then circled Emma's school. We make an example, Whitaker said. Not with blood, not with something that brings state eyes, with pressure. He turned back to the enforcer. A warning that feels personal, a consequence that looks accidental, and a message that anyone who resists will lose more than their peace. The enforcer's grin returned, slow and cruel. And the dog? He asked. Whitaker's eyes didn't soften. Dogs can be removed, he said. Handlers can be discredited. Guardians can be frightened into silence. He leaned closer, voice low, intimate, like advice. But first, we find what the girl has, or what she knows. Because that's the only thing standing between us and a very public collapse. The enforcer nodded once, eager. Whitaker picked up his pen again and tapped it twice, like a judge's gavel. No more mistakes, he said. The town is watching, so we make them watch the right thing. By sundown, Maple Row looked like a street that had learned to flinch. The air had turned sharp and still, the kind of cold that made porch lights seem harsher and shadows longer. And Maris could feel eyes on the Lawson house even when the blinds were closed. The first warning came in the smallest possible package. A note folded into a tight square and shoved beneath the front mat like a secret. Maris found it when she reached for her keys, and her hands went numb as she read 3 words written in blocky black ink. Stop digging, Maris. No signature, no threat spelled out. Because the threat was implied by the fact someone had been close enough to her door to leave it. An hour later, a crash echoed down the street, and neighbors rushed out to see Mrs. Klein's mailbox bent backward like a broken arm. The wooden post splintered, the metal box dented so deeply it looked punched. People tried to laugh it off, kids being stupid. But no one laughed for real, not with the memory of the doorbell footage still fresh in their minds. A patrol car rolled by twice, then parked directly across from the Lawson house and stayed there, idling with headlights off like it had simply chosen that spot for the night. When Maris stepped onto the porch, the officer inside didn't wave. He stared forward, pretending not to see her, the blue dash lights casting a cold glow on his jaw. The message was clear. We're watching you, and worse, we want you to feel watched. Cal arrived after dark, quiet as a shadow, and the second he saw the patrol car, his expression tightened. "They're leaning on you," he said, voice low. Maris tried to keep her chin high, but fear had a way of crawling under pride. "Halverson called," she admitted. "He said if I keep stirring this up, he'll report me for filing a false claim. He said I'm confusing a child, and it could be considered neglect." Cal's eyes hardened. "That's not concern," he said. "That's leverage." Rex paced once near the fence line, then stopped and stared into the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach, hackles just barely lifted. Later that night, Cal's phone buzzed with a notification that made his mouth go flat. "And now they're coming for me," he muttered, showing Maris the screen. A complaint filed with the department's oversight board accusing him of interfering with an ongoing investigation and inciting public panic. Bogus, but damaging. The kind of paperwork that didn't need to be true to make trouble. Cal pocketed the phone and breathed once, controlled. "This is containment," he said again, softer this time, like repeating it made it easier to fight. "They want us tired, scared, alone." Maris swallowed. "Emma's asking why the police car is outside," she whispered. "She thinks she did something wrong." Cal's gaze flicked toward the staircase, where the faint sound of a child's footsteps moved across the landing. "You tell her the truth she can hold," he said, "that grown-ups are handling it. That she's safe, and that she did nothing wrong." The words were steady, but the room felt like a shelter made of glass. And both of them knew one more push could shatter it. That's when the knock came. 3 quick taps, then a pause, then 2 more, a pattern that sounded careful, rehearsed. Rex's head snapped toward the door, body stiff, but he didn't bark. He sniffed, then let out a short huff and sat. An unusual signal, almost like permission. Cal moved first, opening the door just enough to keep his body between the visitor and the house. A woman stood on the porch, hood up, shoulders hunched against the cold, eyes darting toward the patrol car across the street. Maris recognized her with a jolt. Tessa Bell, a dispatcher at the station, the one who always sounded cheerful on non-emergency calls. Tonight she looked like someone carrying a secret too heavy for her spine. "I shouldn't be here," Tessa whispered, voice strained. "If they see me." Cal's stare was sharp but not unkind. "Then why are you?" he asked. Tessa swallowed hard and pulled something from inside her jacket. A small USB drive taped to a folded printout. Her hands shook as she held it out. "Because I can't do this anymore," she said, the words cracking. "I heard the calls. I saw the logs. They didn't just dismiss you. Halverson ordered it. He told units to stand down. He told them to label it neighborhood disturbance even after the lockdown started." She unfolded the paper, revealing a time-stamped dispatch record and a keycard entry from the municipal building, 2 lines highlighted in yellow. "This shows who accessed the evidence locker last night," Tessa whispered. "And this," she tapped the USB, "is the security video from the station's side hallway. It catches Halverson meeting with a guy I've never seen in uniform, handing him a folder, and then telling him, 'Clean it up before morning.'" The air in the doorway went cold in a new way. Not weather cold. Truth cold. Cal took the drive carefully, like it might explode, and for the first time his composure showed a hairline crack. Not panic, but fury held behind discipline. "Tessa," he said quietly, "do you understand what you just did?" Tears shone in her eyes as she nodded. "Yeah," she breathed. "And I'm done being quiet." Behind them, Rex stared past the porch, ears pricked toward the patrol car, as if he could feel the shift in the night. The moment when fear stopped being the only thing in the room, and evidence finally had teeth. Cal didn't sleep, and neither did the town, not really. Not with a patrol car idling like a threat across from the Lawson house and a secret burning inside a tiny USB drive on Maris's kitchen table. He waited until the street quieted, until the officer in the cruiser leaned back like boredom had finally won. Then he stepped into the hallway and made one call that didn't go through the local station. He called a number only a handful of people still had. The kind of number that belonged to an office with a seal on the wall and no interest in small-town politics. When the voice answered, Cal spoke in clipped, controlled phrases. Former K-9 unit, credible witness, evidence of tampering, video proof, dispatch logs, a child targeted, local command, compromised. And he heard the tone on the other end change from routine to razor sharp. "Do not confront anyone," the voice warned. "Do not let that evidence out of your sight. We're coming." The line went dead, and the silence after it felt like the last calm before a storm breaks. At dawn, the storm arrived. Not sirens this time. Purpose. Unmarked SUVs rolled in like shadows, agents stepping out in plain jackets with badges that didn't ask permission. They moved fast and quiet, securing streets, collecting phones for voluntary copies, marking evidence with gloved hands. Maple Row watched from porches and windows, faces pale because everyone could feel the shift. This wasn't Halverson's cozy circle anymore. This was outside force, outside control. The first domino fell at the edge of town near Whitaker Hardware, where the bully enforcer tried to bolt from a side door the moment he saw the SUVs. He made it 3 steps before a pair of agents pinned him against the brick, cuffs clicking like punctuation. He struggled, then saw the cameras, saw the neighbors gathering, and his bravado drained out of him. "I didn't," he started, but the words collapsed under their own weight. In the interview room, faced with the station hallway video and the dispatch logs, he folded fast, flipping from menace to pleading like a man desperate to save his own skin. He named names. He described the project. He admitted to testing the window, to leaving the note, to smashing the mailbox as a warning. "Halverson told me," he said, voice shaking. "He said, keep it quiet. He said the kid saw something." The second domino fell an hour later when agents walked into the local station and asked Halverson to stand up. He tried the folksy smile, tried the practiced calm, but his hands betrayed him. One finger tapping too fast against the desk, a twitch at the corner of his eye. "This is a misunderstanding," he began. And one agent slid a still frame across the counter. Halverson in the hallway, passing a folder to a civilian, leaning close, mouth forming the words, "Clean it up." The smile evaporated. "That's not," Halverson started, but the agent's voice cut clean through him. "Lieutenant Halverson, you are being placed under arrest for obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy." The cuffs went on, and the station, his kingdom, went silent. The third domino took longer, because respectable men don't crumble in public unless the ground is already gone beneath them. Alden Whitaker arrived at the station with a lawyer at his side and indignation in his eyes, insisting this was political theater, insisting the town needed him. But the evidence didn't care how many ribbons he'd cut. Agents executed search warrants at his office. pulled ledgers from false bottom drawers, found permits and payments, and a missing folder marked with the same symbol Maris later recognized from her late brother's old notebook. Whitaker's voice stayed smooth until they played the enforcer's statement and showed him the paper trail that tied his project to bribes, intimidation, and a plan to silence anyone who threatened it. His face tightened, then hardened, then finally, just for a breath, his composure cracked, revealing panic beneath polish. When they let him out, the town watched from the sidewalk, stunned that the man who'd smiled at bake sales could be the same man who'd ordered a child's window tested in the dark. Weeks passed like a slow exhale. The patrol car vanished. The phone calls stopped. The bruised community began to repair itself. Neighbors apologized for looking away. Teachers organized a safety meeting that actually listened. The station was placed under interim leadership from outside the county. Tessa Bell was quietly protected, her name kept out of public releases. But Maris never forgot her trembling hands on the porch and the courage it took to step into the light. Emma returned to school, still jumpy around sudden noises, but steadier each day, especially when Rex was nearby. And on a crisp morning when sunlight warmed the siding and the air smelled like clean pine instead of fear, Rex walked up to the Lawson yard without a leash and sat beneath Emma's bedroom window. No howling, no growling, just a calm, watchful presence, ears relaxed, eyes soft. Emma pressed her face to the glass and smiled down at him, small fingers tracing the window pane where the latch had been touched. Maris stood behind her, one hand resting on the girl's shoulder, and Cal watched from the porch with the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd seen justice arrive the hard way. The town would talk about the arrests, the scandal, the disgrace. But the truth of that night lived in a simpler image. A retired police dog in the rain, refusing to leave, sounding the alarm before anyone else understood. Rex hadn't howled to scare anyone. He'd howled to save her.